The war on drugs makes me ashamed to be a human being. It makes me ashamed to live in America amongst people who live in a brainwashed, drugs are bad state of mind. I could talk about the fact that people who want to do drugs will do them regardless of legality. I could talk about the fact that the illegality of drugs creates an incredibly large black market which swims with violence, murder, and other real crime. I could talk about the fact that the illegality of drugs makes criminals rich. I could talk about the fact that alcohol is legal and in concept is no different than any other drug, or maybe that it's worse on many different levels than most illegal drugs. I could talk about the fact that children who go through programs like DARE are actually statistically more likely to become drug addicts. I could talk about how our prison space problem is caused by a system of law that jails people who have done no harm whatsoever to others. But I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about something much more basic, much simpler. People who are not directly putting other people's well-being at risk should not be punished, let alone by their own government. People who have done no harm to any other person should not be punished by their own government. It is that simple. If some guy does cocaine and kills another man, arrest that guy. He is responsible for killing that man. But if some guy does cocaine and he has a nice time, what can you punish him for? It's his decision. It's his body. He's hurting himself. He's allowed to do that. It's his own body. The government does not own him and should not be able to tell him what he can do with himself. People say that the cocaine impairs the man's judgment. By doing cocaine, he is putting other people's well-being at risk. Judgment can be impaired by nearly anything. Impaired judgment happens all the time. Impaired judgment happens when you drink too much, but that's legal. An overly emotional reaction to something can impair your judgment. Any emotion at all can impair judgment. Even if this wasn't the case, quality of judgment is subjective, and in many cases, a specific person's impaired judgment or altered judgment may actually be better in society's eyes than that person's unimpaired judgment. Drugs serve functions. That's why we use them as medicine. What if someone wants to try LSD to have a spiritual experience? That person educates themselves on the effects of the drug, the possible outcomes, the possible complications, and takes several reasonable precautionary measures. Why should the drug be illegal for them? Because other people like to do acid every day. And even for those people, even for the people who like to do acid every day, they should be allowed to do that. If they get themselves addicted, okay, that's a bad thing. We can help them as a society. But it's not the government's job to step in, say, hey, you can't do that, and imprison them. All drugs should be legalized. There will be so many major positive consequences. As it was said before, people who don't want to use drugs aren't going to use them once they're legal. Not everyone that uses drugs is a druggie, and not everyone that smokes pot is a pothead. But that's what people think. Maybe not to that extent, but people still think drugs are bad. It's ingrained into the brain of every child, in every school, in every state. It's beaten senselessly into the collective consciousness of the people. High school health books use biased arguments to keep teenagers away from drugs. TV commercials advertise that drugs are a negative thing while providing no real information whatsoever. And American taxpayers have to pay for that. They pay to have that happen. They're forced to. The government is taking your money and brainwashing your children and jailing your innocent citizens and taking away your personal freedoms. We came to America to escape oppression. We want our government to provide unbiased information. We want our government to tell us the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. It is a radical notion, and most people will not want to accept it, but all drugs should be legalized. And we are told that we live in a democracy, so what do we need to do? We need to spread the word. We need to inform people. We need to let our leaders know that we want these freedoms back. We need to let them know that there are a lot of us and very few of them. So spread the word and Take a stand. Nothing is going to change unless you say something.